Welcome back, everyone. Onan here. So, as the title will probably give away, this might be a counterintuitive episode here, but hear me out. So, is the ultimate solution to a lot of the problems in the problems that people have with Catholic morality and specifically Catholic marriage morality, is to put less emphasis on sex and the conjugal act and liberalize other ways of being active sexually, whether it's as a couple or solo. Yes, masturbation. So, when you really sit down and study the rules and people's struggles with NFP, the struggles always come down to the fact that NFP um, results in an abstinence. And for, I would say, most sort of conservative or traditional Catholic scholars, that abstinence means true abstinence. No hanky panky, no other acts, no solo acts, or solar acts. And that really is where I would say the problems really arise within Catholic marriage for a couple of reasons. Number one, it puts enormous pressure and emphasis on the conjugal act itself. And I would say in most marriages, myself included, results in the husband who is, in most circumstances, receiving less sexual intimacy than he would like, trying to encourage, press, pressure, or if you're a real traditionalist, invoke the marital debt to get your spouse to have sexual, you know, relations more than she would want. So the man tends to be unhappy because he's still having it less than he would like, probably, and the wife may be unhappy because she's having it more often than she would want. And at the end of the day, no one is really happy. Probably, I would say in most marriages, there's even when things are going well, there's a certain shared level of frustration with the whole thing. And it all boils down to whether the couple can or should, or individuals can or should, receive any sort of sexual enjoyment, sexual release, or sexual activity outside of the conjugal act itself, setting aside the whole issue of contraception. And from my perspective, this is where the problems really, really become apparent in marriage, and certainly became apparent in my marriage, is I struggled pretty much unsuccessfully throughout the course of my marriage to find ways to encourage my wife, who is, let's say, your typical low desire, responsive desire person, especially once we had kids, trying to find ways to make her want to do it more than she would like to do. And at various points, we've been successful, but never really to the point where I felt completely fulfilled or even modestly fulfilled. But anything is better than nothing, right? And I'm sure from her perspective, she feels like she's always had to go above and beyond. And if it were up to her, she would go weeks or, let's say months. We go weeks all the time, go months or years without any and be completely content by that. And some would say, well, she still needs it. And I think she does. And I think as a responsive desire person, she doesn't, she needs to be actively moving in that direction before the full effect of the desire hits her. But at the same time, she's perfectly fine going extended periods of time without it. And in many ways, our marriage has been best, or our intimate life has been best when we've been less frequent than more frequent, because even for a low desire slash responsive desire person like my wife, if it's been 2 weeks since we were intimate, if we were intimate, she is far more likely to be desiring it and enjoying it than if it was 3 days. And so abstinence really does make the heart grow fonder, especially for, I would say, my wife and other women like her that are responsive desire slash low desire. Those are two different things, but they often go hand in hand, I would say. But for me, that's just a complete total misery. Although it has been less miserable during the periods of my marriage when I've been less scrupulous, less concerned with avoiding, let's say, solo activity during that time. And there's been times that I just took the position that this is not a moral issue, and that when my wife and I can't, or she won't, or whatever, it's there as a fallback, and I use it as needed, and it tremendously reduces the amount of stress on our marriage and the pressure I put on my wife, and the frustration I experience goes way down when I don't have to, rely on her entirely for that. But as Catholics, what are we supposed to do with that? 2352 is the law of the land. It's said to be intrinsically disordered by the church, and though there are um, factors that can limit culpability, it never really says it's not wrong. But in my personal opinion, that's the only way you can actually make NFP in marriage work. And and from my perspective, for most marriages, and I would put myself in this category, less frequency of the conjugal act and more use of other acts or solo acts as needed is probably the ideal recipe for success for us. But I don't know if that's compatible with church teaching. I don't know if that's the moral perspective, but if you want my own personal opinion, um, I think for most of us, you need a mixture of both and probably less emphasis on the conjugal act. Now, if both spouses want it and it can happen, by all means, go ahead. But almost invariably, one spouse has a much higher desire than the other, and they are, you know, more of the um, what's the word I'm looking for? More the initiator, and maybe the only initiator, quite frankly, and are probably always dealing with some level of frustration and disappointment, regardless of how they personally feel about the habit of using solo. But um, I think I think if we looked at this, if I looked at this without really any consideration of what the church has said historically or says now, I would very much argue that this is the correct approach for most couples. Don't make the conjugal act your only only allowable, the only way that you have intimacy with each other, and be more freedom and prudential and open to other forms of sexual expression or sexual release without turning all of it into a moral conundrum, either for the individual or the couple. As it is, Catholic marriage is almost entirely plagued by some level of scrupulosity, moral indifference, infighting, resentment, all of this, because the approach that I have laid out doesn't seem to be the one that most people ascribe to, nor the one that seems to be officially allowed by the church. But I think it is far superior to any of the other approaches. It's the one I would advocate before any of the other approaches, whether it's the extreme traditionalism, which is the marital debt and all that, on the one hand, to complete laissez-faire contraception, everything is okay. On the other hand, I think if you do this, you don't have to allow contraception. It makes the marriage easier, but not easy. It makes responsible parenting and procreation much more deliberate and intentional than it is for most of us that use NFP. Because let's be honest, most of us just give in, or our spouses give in. Because NFP without some other way of experiencing sexual enjoyment, sexual release really is really terrible. It just is, which is why no one wants to use it. Why everyone either abandons it altogether or goes and uses contraception. But my approach, at least, allow what I think is a much more uh, reasonable and attainable approach for most people on either side of that extreme. So anyway, that's just my thoughts. Maybe tomorrow I'll have completely other thoughts, but it's something I've been thinking about for a while, and I feel strongly that this approach, um, notwithstanding whatever the church has said or will say, seems to me much more reasonable and consistent with human nature, and just actually attainable in a way that marriage is um, can still grow and prosper even under difficult circumstances. So I want to throw that out there. Curious if people have other. I'm sure most people disagree with that in some respects, but I'm putting that out there. It's my thoughts, and that's what I'm gonna do on this channel. So anyway, want to share that with you guys. Appreciate everyone for listening. And until next time, everyone, have a good one.